The morning of August 6th, 1945, opened hot and blue over Hiroshima. Children in white shirts and caps moved through the streets with the quick steps of habit. Some headed to school, many assigned to clear firebreaks and rubble as part of wartime duty. At 8:15 a.m., the sky flashed white. It was not lightning. It was a hard, searing light that erased color and shadow. A pressure wave followed like a hammer, windows blown inward, beams torn loose, walls folding as if the city had been picked up and shaken. Heat raced across tile and timber at thousands of degrees. Children nearest the center of the blast didn't shout or run. They were there in one instant and gone in the next, their outlines fixed in pale silhouettes on steps and walls where their bodies had shielded the stone. The weapon was Little Boy, an atomic bomb dropped from the B-29 Enola Gay. It detonated roughly 1,900 feet over the city to maximize destruction. In one pulse, 2/3 of Hiroshima's buildings were flattened or set alight. Neighborhoods of wood and paper became fuel. For the school crews working outdoors, the strike felt like the sun falling. Many died on the spot. Others stumbled into streets already burning, their clothing vaporized or fused to skin, hands lifted and held away from their bodies because the pain of contact was unbearable. Teachers tried to gather classes and found half their roster missing, desks overturned, and the room open to the sky. Survivors remember the sound going strange after the blast, everything muffled, then surging back as a thicket of voices rose through smoke. Children wandered half-blind, eyes swollen shut, crying for water and for their mothers. Fire moved in sheets from house to house, driven by a wind the explosion itself had created. The rivers became refuge and grave at once. Families and classmates climbed down embankments to cool their burns and breathe air that wasn't fire, only to find the water crowded with bodies. The smell, scorched wood, oil, and burned flesh, settled over the city and would not lift. In the first hours, help was a matter of whoever could still stand. Hospitals had collapsed or burned. Doctors and nurses were dead or injured with everyone else. A schoolyard became a first aid station. A temple became a ward. A surviving porch roof became an operating table. Teachers stripped their own shirts to bind burns. Parents carried children for miles through streets that no longer existed on any map. Many of the wounded begged for water. Some who drank collapsed minutes later. It was no moral lesson, only a cruel fact of the trauma their bodies had endured. Then came the injuries no one could see. Children who had escaped the flames began to weaken. Fevers climbed. Vomiting wouldn't stop. Gums bled. Purple spots spread under the skin. Clumps of hair fell out in the hands of mothers who were trying to wash ash and glass from their children's scalps. No one in Hiroshima had a name yet for radiation sickness, but everyone felt its reach. The city's medical stores were gone. A few surviving doctors tried to keep lists of symptoms on scraps of paper while they moved through lines of patients lying on tatami salvaged from ruins. In the days after the bombing, the living tried to build order out of heat and ash. Teachers set up impromptu classes wherever there was shade, under tarps strung from charred posts, inside warehouses with one standing wall, in shrines that had not burned. Children returned because routine felt like survival. They brought pencils softened by fire and notebooks clouded with soot at the edges. Lessons were interrupted by funerals, by the search for missing friends, by the simple need to fetch water and rice. Even the act of writing down names felt like defiance. I am here. You were here. We will say it out loud. The status of hibakusha, bomb-affected people, followed the survivors into every part of their lives. Some children grew into adulthood with keloid scars that pulled when they smiled or tried to raise a hand. Others seemed healed and then fell sick years later. Leukemia and other cancers struck without warning. Employers turned them away, worrying about illness. Families hesitated to consent to marriages, fearing children might inherit damage. The bomb had not finished with them when the fires went out. It had set a decades-long test inside their bodies and inside their communities, and it changed everything from wedding plans to job prospects. From the beginning, children also became the city's clearest voice. Among them was Sadako Sasaki. She was 2 when the bomb fell. 10 years later, she was diagnosed with leukemia. In a hospital bed, she folded paper cranes, one after another, hundreds, then more than 1,000, following the belief that such devotion might call health back to her. She kept folding, even when her fingers trembled. Classmates and strangers took up the task. Sadako died at 12, but the cranes did not stop. They multiplied into a language the whole world could understand, grief carried forward as a vow. Hiroshima built that language into stone and ritual. The Genbaku Dome, the skeletal frame of the former industrial promotion hall, was left standing at the hypocenter, its curved girders lifted like bones against the sky. It is a ruin, and it is also a witness. The Children's Peace Monument stands not far away, raised by school children to honor Sadako and all the children lost that day. Every year on August 6th, cranes in bright colors arrive from around the world, bundled in strings, stacked in glass cases, draped like garlands over railings, each one folded by hands that never saw the flash or the smoke and still understand something necessary about what it means to live after. There were the smaller rebuildings too, the ones that do not make it into official histories. A teacher saved a scorched bell and used it to call roll in a tent classroom. A mother learned to sew new sleeves that would not rub against a child's burn scars. A boy found his way to a baseball field cut into a rough open lot and learned, day by day, that his body could be trusted again. A girl memorized poems because paper was scarce, held stanzas in her head until she could pass them to a friend. These were acts of reconstruction as basic as brick and timber, the remaking of rhythm, habit, and hope. The testimonies of children, first recorded by teachers and doctors, later by scholars and visitors, fixed the human scale of the event. They did not argue about strategy or justify decisions. They named a friend who did not come home, a sister who asked for water and fell asleep, a classroom that was there in the morning and gone by noon. Some survivors carried those memories into auditoriums and radio studios and city halls, telling the story as many times as anyone would listen. Others never spoke in public, but taught it in the way they raised their families, careful, wary, insistent that ordinary mornings can change without warning. Time moved forward, but not evenly. Some children grew up, married, and watched their grandchildren run past the Peace Memorial on summer nights to float lanterns down the river, each flame a small answer to the darkness that had once covered everything. Others died young, their bodies unable to outrun the damage laid down in a single minute of exposure. The city kept count, and also understood that numbers alone could not hold what had happened. The shadows on stone steps, the cranes under glass, the names read each year at the memorial service. These were ways of telling the truth without flattening it. Hiroshima is a living city now, trams humming, students biking, shops open late, but it has built space for the memory of its children into its ordinary days. That is the lesson the survivors pressed into the world when they found their voices. Peace is not an idea you set on a shelf. It is an act you repeat, a habit you teach, a warning you carry. When they speak, they do not argue history. They describe a morning and its cost. They say what it felt like to stand in white light and then walk through fire looking for a friend. They say what it means to rebuild a life with scars that never quite stop hurting. They do not end with anger. They end with insistence, never again. The children of Hiroshima anchor the story in a way statistics cannot. They are the missing desks, the small shoes recovered from ash, the voices that learned to testify with patience when their bodies would not allow strength. They remind us that weapons speak a human language in the end, one measured in families, classrooms, and futures cut short. Their cranes and their stories travel farther each year, carried by hands that never knew them and still understand them. The plea those children made, by living, by speaking, by folding paper one bird at a time, remains the clearest warning the modern world has ever received. Thank you for listening to Last Post History. Subscribe for more true stories from the world at war.